Hi, this is Brian Kim. I'm going to share with you case number 134 in the best way to do cataract surgery series. This is a patient with a 2 to 3 plus, more like a 3 plus lens density. And you're going to see double chop, cross chop, mechanical fracturing techniques. And you're going to see as the lens is being disassembled, the pupil is coming down. And you're going to see how I'm able to navigate around the shrinking pupil. Again, utilizing the instruments with mechanical forces, hooking lens pieces up out of the bag, and by doing this, I'm able to very easily and more confidently navigate around the shrinking pupil. I use a cotton tip to steady the eye, and I use a corneal marker, which will help me to center and size the rexus. Holding the eye steady with the cotton tip, I make a paracentesis incision, first on the right side and then the left side, making sure I'm parallel to the iris plane, which creates a nice corneal shelf, which will allow me to achieve a self-sealing incision. This is intracameral lidocaine, and then some intracameral epinephrine. And this is some dispersive viscoelastic, which will help to coat the corneal endothelium and to flatten the anterior capsule. This is a triplanar corneal incision. I make a vertical groove, place the blade into the deep part of the groove, tunnel through the cornea, turn the eye towards me, and then I enter. This is the puncture style capsular rexus. I'm using the Inamuras here. I'm going to puncture the center, pull towards me, creating a tear, pushing on the right side to create a little bit of a flap, grabbing the right side of the tear, going around circumferentially, trying to follow the corneal mark that I made, which will hopefully help me to achieve a well-centered and sized rexus. Burp some viscoelastic out. And this is the capsular fornix hydrodissection technique. I place the cannula under the rexus edge contra-incisionally, point the tip down, get a nice wave, decompress on the left side, hooking the peripheral lens on the right, and you can see the lens begins to spin. Irrigate the surface of the eye, adjusting my sleeve, lifting the incision with the chopper, going in with irrigation off to minimize Descemet's trauma, removing the surface epinuclear material, placing the chopper under the rexus edge contra-incisionally, the phaco tip vertically sub-incisionally, bringing the instruments together, crushing the lens and bisecting it in half, that is double chop, placing the chopper around the right heminucleus, pulling it centrally towards the phaco tip, crushing the right heminucleus in half, that is cross chop, using some vacuum to lift that first quadrant up, grabbing and crushing the lens between the instruments, and then emulsifying the lens pieces. Right here, you can start to see the pupil starting coming down. I do think this is probably a little bit of an IFIS situation. I'm placing the chopper under the rexus edge around that second quadrant, crushing the lens in half, and then using some vacuum to grab the lens pieces, crushing it between the instruments, and then emulsifying the lens pieces. Using some vacuum to grab that one little piece, emulsifying it, turning the second heminucleus in front of me, placing the chopper around the lens piece, pulling it centrally towards the phaco tip, which is deep in the bag, bisecting that lens piece in half. It's nice and loose, using some vacuum to grab that quadrant, crushing the lens between the instruments, and then emulsifying the lens piece. Placing the chopper around that last quadrant, hooking the peripheral lens. It didn't work. Going back again. Now it hooked it, pulling it towards the phaco tip, crushing and bisecting that quadrant in half, crushing it between the instruments, emulsifying the lens pieces. Doing the same maneuver on this last piece, hooking the peripheral lens, using some vacuum to support that lens, bring it up, crushing the lens between the instruments, and then emulsifying the lens piece. Using some vacuum to grab the anterior aspect of the epinucleus, and it tumbles out nicely, grabbing that last piece, making sure the chopper is deep to protect the posterior capsule. So I take the chopper out, push BSS in, take the phaco tip out, go in with the INI handpiece. I always start sub-incisionally, removing the cortex anterior to posterior, peeling it. There's not much there to grab in this case, so I go ahead and sweep around on the right side, and you can see the lens starts coming out here, the lens pieces. You can see there's this fine wispy material on the posterior capsule. I'll have to deal with that later. I switch to polish mode, grabbing that lens piece. I grab some Cortex, switch to Cortex mode, and then peel that out. I'm in polish mode again, and I'm just very carefully polishing the posterior capsule. You can see there's this fine wispy remnants. These are very annoying in my experience, and I really don't know any magical formula on how to avoid those. But sometimes when the epinucleus comes out and the cortex comes out and it doesn't come out, when you peel it like you do from anterior to posterior, it does leave this fine wispy lens material. So I've done the best I could to clean the capsular bag. I'm having some trouble with the incision. I finally get in and push and pulse VSS into the subincisional or capsular fornix, and you can see there's quite a bit of stuff that starts coming out. So that's why I really like that maneuver, polishing, and then I use a little bit of vacuum to grab that lens material with the INA tip. And once that's clean, I push and fill the capsular bag with cohesive viscoelastic. I'm taking care of making sure that the iris doesn't come out as I do this, and I'm decompressing as I do this. There you go. Turn the water off, and then I slowly come out. So rather than sweeping, since the pupil is small, I go straight to the lens. This is a single piece acrylic lens, making sure the leading edge goes within the capsular bag. As the lens unfolds, I go ahead and place the sweeper here, since I had it in my hand, in my other hand, making sure both haptics go inside the bag here. And once I get in there and the bag's in place with the haptics off, I go ahead and polish now after the lens is in the bag. And again, I'm not too aggressive. I'm not trying to polish into the capsular fornix or anything like that. I'm trying to polish just at the rexus edge underneath the anterior capsule. So I go in with the INA handpiece, activate irrigation, going underneath the lens, tilting it, making sure that all the viscoelastic from within the bag is removed, pushing the optic back down. I'm pretty sure that the haptics are still within the bag. Switching to polish mode, polishing underneath the rexus edge, and then switching to visco mode, removing all the viscoelastic from the anterior chamber. Again, you can see how floppy now the iris is. It's just billowing with the currents from the INA. I'm in visco mode, so it's a higher IOP. And so you can see that billowing, and this is indeed an IFIS situation, but thankfully we didn't really deal with any serious complications from the IFIS. I'm very careful and mindful to decompress and turning the fluid off when I come out with the INA handpiece, and then I go ahead and hydrate my incision. So again, this is a patient with a borderline pupil, a shrinking pupil. It was actually IFIS, and pretty much dense lens, 2 to 3 plus, more like a 3 plus. Use mechanical fracturing techniques to crush the lens between the instruments instead of going after with sculpting, grabbing it, lollipopping it with lens, with the phaco tip or anything like that. Again, different from traditional techniques, but in my experience, by using mechanical forces, it's much more direct, much more easy to disassemble the lens pieces. You can have more confidence going after lens pieces within the bag. Since I'm not using vacuum or phaco, I don't have to worry about damaging the posterior capsule or the capsular bag in any way. And in my experience and in my opinion, this is why this is the best way to do cataract surgery, in particular for dense lenses and borderline pupils. So I hope this was helpful to you, and I thank you for your attention.